technical problems. My name is Patricia, and I am a voice and vocal coach and singer and pianist, as you know, Seth, and I am helping people to build strong, resilient, and more embodied voices. But here, yeah, right on. And tonight, though, we are not going to talk about singing, perhaps a little bit about music, your music, but I would like to mainly focus on nervous system, healing, and self-healing in particular.
Yes.
Yeah, because this is something what I see is happening all over the place, that people are ending relationships and breaks up with everybody and the family members, you know, and sometimes in isolation because of their chronic symptoms and sickness or anything, that they are not able to actually be surrounded by other people who can help them regulate or co-regulate, right, or heal.
Yeah.
And also that people that surround them don't really know about this work because, as we both know, this is brand new stuff, right?
Relatively, yeah. I mean, the work was developed in the 70s, but it really wasn't implemented in a wide scale until the late 80s, 90s. And so it's in terms of the realm of mental health and emotional health, it's very new, yes.
Yeah. So I was thinking to talk about that aspect of healing when you are alone, and is it possible actually to fully recover and restore our nervous system health when we're alone, because we are mammals and we do like to heal in community, right?
Yes.
And surrounded by safe people, but it's, like I said, not possible for everybody. So
Right.
this is the subject for tonight. But before we dive in, I think maybe many people who are joining this call might not know about what nervous system regulation actually is. So could you, like in a nutshell, give us a little information about that, nervous system regulation?
Sure thing. So we work with the nervous system because we are working with trauma. So that's the first thing to make clear. This is a form of trauma resolution. What we found in this new, what we call the new traumatology, meaning the work of Peter Levine, Stephen Porges, Bessel van der Kolk, many others in this field who have pioneered the way, is that it is the nervous system fundamentally that is affected by trauma. Now, the whole human being is affected by trauma. But what I mean by fundamentally is, at its core, the nervous system is where these fight, flight, and freeze survival responses live. And what we have found is that what trauma really is when these survival energies, which are very powerful, become activated in response to overwhelming events and then do not deactivate due to a variety of reasons. Maybe we're too young, or we're helpless, or we need to preserve the attachment to the family system. There's social conditioning, repress your emotions. There's many, many reasons. But what happens is these survival energies, they get activated and they don't deactivate. So they're running underneath the surface, these fight, flight, freeze responses. And then that then ripples out to affect the entire human physiology, the emotions, the minds, the behaviors, the relationships we choose, everything. But the core is those autonomic nervous system responses. So that's the level at which we work.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And somatic experiencing, nervous system and somatic experiencing that you've studied, they're really related, right?
Yes, somatic experiencing is the sort of the hallmark, the most well-known of all the nervous system modalities. It's really the best. On its own, it's not entirely complete. There's other modalities called somatic practice, which is a form of touch-based work that was developed for early developmental trauma, whereas SE, somatic experiencing, focuses a bit more on shock trauma. So when you have those two pieces together, somatic practice, which was developed by a somatic experiencing practitioner, a woman named Patti, who realized there was this piece missing that was about growing fundamental safety, growing regulation, rather than focusing on just working with the shock traumas and getting these activations out. It's about increasing capacity and overall cellular safety. So when you have those two together, somatic practice and somatic experiencing, those really are the gold standard for nervous system-based trauma resolution. And then we also bring in Feldenkrais, the work of Moshe Feldenkrais. And he was sort of the godfather of neuroplastic healing before anybody knew what that was. So neuroplasticity means the ability for your neurons to rewire, for the system, the brain, the nervous system to rewire and change and recover from trauma. And Feldenkrais is very powerful at helping rewire. It's also very advanced though. So we've found that that is like the nice thing. Sorry, lost my light. That is the nice thing to add sort of at the end once we build the foundations through these other practices. So the work we do is like this trifecta of those three modalities. And they're all very much about working with the nervous system.
Right. Could you share with the audience and whoever is going to watch this later in replay, what were the modalities you actually tried for your own self-healing, in your own self-healing journey before learning about nervous system and somatic experiencing?
Yeah, lots. Psychology. When I was a kid, they took me to the psychologist because I was clearly having problems. By the time I was a teenager, I already had complex PTSD, so that didn't help at all. I discovered the world of meditation in my 20s, got very deep into that, did a couple 10-day Vipassana sits, which was very powerful, but didn't really touch my trauma. Rebirthing, energy work, shamanic work, emotional expression, working with like primal expression, movement, working with tarot and crystals. I mean, all the new age stuff, which there's lots of good stuff in there, but none of it really will touch the trauma. Yeah, we still use tons of crystals and we love all that stuff. It's powerful and it works, but it doesn't heal trauma. It helps with our energy overall, maybe, all of these practices. And like the shamanic tradition is extremely valuable, which basically means having your primary relationship be of one with the earth, the felt senses of your body, your intuition. That's very supportive of nervous system work. But in order to really get at the trauma, you have to know the specific work. I basically ended up living in the woods for about 13 years, either on my own or in small communities, because I couldn't really deal with the world as it was. And I just thought, okay, that's my lifestyle. Right. And I felt pretty okay that way because it was a safe bubble I had created. But if I left that bubble, like if I went to town, just flooded with anxiety and couldn't barely function. So it's not until I found this nervous system work that things really changed. And then I became a practitioner myself because it was so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And when you were living, I think it was also Hawaii, right?
Hawaii and Oregon were the two main places. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful place. Wow,
Yeah.
you've been some nice places.
Yeah.
Where you, when you were there, I'm sorry, I keep putting in and out, but this headphone is not really working well. When you were there and you said you were living inside of that beautiful community, I believe there were many people like yourself who were also searching for peace and healing. And so that means you were in that safe community. And even though you were there, I remember you telling me this in our first interview with it last summer, that didn't really touch the trauma and your nervous system, and you did not know about that, right?
That's right.
And, that is a little bit connected to our topic tonight, because it's about self-healing.
Yes.
Yeah, and so regardless to if you are in a safe environment or alone, is it possible to actually restore health on the nervous system level? Because that is what I've mentioned before when we started, is happening for many people, being alone.
Yes. I mean, ending up alone or isolated is very common for anyone who goes through trauma, often because few people understand. Also because people in the world just become scary. And we tend to feel that the world and other people are a threat, even if it's not or they're not. So it's very common. Plus, the system breaks down over time with trauma. So we end up with autoimmune conditions and chronic fatigue and anxiety and depression and all these various physical ailments that are part of it. which can make it function, difficult to function and get out into the world. So yes, this happens a lot. And yes, a person absolutely can make tremendous growth in their healing on their own, if they have access to the right work. You have to have access to the right practices, the right education, and the right support. So there does need to be some interaction in terms of getting support. Now, in the work that we've created, and I'm in private practice, so I work one-on-one, but we've also, my wife, Irene, created this online world of the same work such that people can do this work even if they're on their own in their house. And as long as you have an internet connection, you can do the work. And we and our team, we've got a team of 9 professional, highly trained somatic experiencing, somatic practice practitioners who are very skilled that provide support in our online programs. So you don't necessarily have to interact with anybody one-on-one. You can, we, like in our programs, people ask questions and we supply the answers in the online forum. It's all text-based. And then there's we have live Q&A calls where we answer questions and stuff. So we provide support for people who may be very isolated, and we do it through this online format. And now there's other ways. There are people, practitioners, myself included, who offer online sessions. So it's also possible to work one-on-one with somebody. And that may or may not be a good fit. And one of the things about trauma, and especially early developmental trauma, is that it can be tricky in one-on-one relationships, even with a practitioner, because there can often be a need to perform. There can be attachment patterns that come into the therapeutic process with another person where the client feels like they have to be a certain way because of their trauma. And all of that can be worked with, but one-on-one therapy can be scary for some people with a trauma history. And so we've found that a lot of people really benefit from the online format of the way that we've put this work together because they can do it on their own. And hopefully then eventually what will happen, and we've seen this over and over again, is that the participants in our programs who start to get better, they eventually realize that, oh, maybe I can connect a little bit with this person, or I can get a pet. I can have a mammal, a fellow little mammal with me, which can be really important if you are on your own. And it depends if you're on your own because you're scared of everybody, or if you're on your own because of debilitating symptoms, but you really want connection. Of course, those are two different, very different scenarios. So, the way that you move through that will depend on where you're coming from. But yeah, it's absolutely possible to at least begin this work and get better if you are on your own.
Yeah, it is very interesting for me because I know some people who are healing or trying to heal, and yeah, they kind of struggle with this. My husband doesn't understand me, or they don't do the work, and or I have toxic parents, or my environment is not dangerous. It's just not really helping me because I'm constantly triggered. And when the system is already in this big dysregulation, it's really hard to navigate, between doing the work and then be kind of re-traumatized or re-triggered every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the core things that we talk about is really you have to have a safe environment to do this work. So it's actually better to be alone and at least be safe, in terms of the people that are around you. If there's no one around you, then at least you don't have toxic people around you, because it's very difficult to gain any ground in trauma work if you're constantly being stressed and re-triggered by your environment. So that's really one of the foundations is, what is my environment? What are my primary relationships? What's my home environment? I mean, to do this work, you need to feel free to do some stuff that could look kind of weird, like some sounds may come out, movements, strange, things. You want to move some aggression. There may be some growling. We talk about healthy aggression and working with the musculature and sound. And there's many ways in which you may behave in ways while doing this work that may seem weird to someone who doesn't, understand or isn't on the same page. And one of the first things we have when people join Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is our 12-week program, is a letter that we wrote to give to people who you may be living with, in case, so they can be informed about what's required, because it's really important to have a safe container. So in some ways, those who are alone have that, at least in terms of having an absence of toxicity, right? They can, and then, you hopefully will then be able to bring in some good connections, because connections are also important. So that's what I was saying, like a first step can often be a pet, even like a fish, or a plant, some plants, it can be, because pets can be stressful too. We don't want to add more stress. Yeah. So it may be a plant or a very simple pet that's easy to take care of, a turtle, it's, or if you feel up to it, a mammal is good, but that's one way to, think about making a step forward once you gain some ground in your health is, well, if you are alone, how can you start finding other living things to relate to that maybe aren't people, but, that are going to speak to your nervous system and your physiology in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, another question I have for you is about healers. Healers that people might be going to get help. And my thoughts about this are, okay, but maybe like this question: can actually someone heal you? Well, let's say, giving an example of energy healer. So someone is an energy healer, and people go and they're being told, your energy chakras centers are blocked, and all we need to do is move the energy, and things are coming to the surface. What do you think about this? Maybe like that.
It depends on the person, it depends on the practitioner, and it depends on the situation. So there are undoubtedly, and I know there are, because I know some of them, very powerful energy workers and healers out there. However, if you have trauma, it's not going to stick, no matter how good they are, because you can do very effective work with people's energy. However, the nervous system is more foundational than your chakras. So your chakras you can look at as sort of a interface. They're part of your etheric field, right? They're energy that is informed, though, by your physiology. So, for example, you could get your chakras cleared and you could feel really different. And this happens. People go to see an energy worker, and they're a good one, and they get a relief, and it feels good, but it doesn't stick, because the survival energies in the nervous system are more powerful, more fundamental than that energy in the energy field. So as long as those survival energies are still at play in the physiology, any form of energy healing won't stick. And there's a whole lot of charlatans out there in that field who have no idea what they're doing. So, I think of all the quote unquote energy healers that I've come across, I've met, 2 or 3 that are the real deal, that are actually really good and know how to work with energy and the etheric field. Yeah.
So definitely you would recommend someone who is doing self-healing, is alone, to definitely get informed all about nervous system. And I do highly recommend, as usual, the Smart Body, Smart Mind with Irene, your wife.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So another thing I would like to ask you a little bit about the voice, since I'm a voice coach and vocal coach, and we touched on that a little bit in our interview. We did, but a little bit more, just how the voice changes when the system is more regulated.
Yeah. Well, as a singer, songwriter, musician myself, nervous system healing and trauma healing was absolutely fundamental to me being able to sing well. There were, physical blocks, one in my system, constrictions in the tissues, literally, from the result of unresolved trauma that had to be resolved. It's not that way with everyone. I mean, it seems like there's lots of great singers who are really, traumatized and in a lot of pain, and they're able to fuel that into this amazing expressive voice. So it's not always one way or the other. However, oftentimes those voices are also not sustainable. Like if you think about a Janis Joplin, right, who's just the powerhouse of like pain and expression, but there's no way that voice lasts, right? That's not sustainable because coming from such a raw emotional place and blasting out the vocal cords. So, I think there's a wide variety. For me, trauma healing, nervous system regulation was essential to being able to sing well, just physically, but also to have the confidence to put myself out there in that kind of vulnerable way, because it's extremely vulnerable. The human voice expression, putting out your own songs and music, it's a very vulnerable thing to do. And that could also be difficult to do if you have unresolved trauma. So I think there's a big connection between the voice and also just the overall ability to feel comfortable expressing yourself in general, having that sense of agency and authenticity, access to authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Can you actually pick up from human voice where a person's nervous system is at? So when I work with people, I kind of hear either they're in their body or they're disconnected, from their body in a way of maybe they just don't feel comfortable in their body, or they are just very nervous. So the pitch rises, right?
Right.
But on the other side, people who are also very deep in the lower pitch and stay there, that also tells me something about their state and way of being.
Right. That they may be too much in the lower body and not able to access the head voice and the mask of the face and that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. And kind of add a question to that, is the flexibility and the ability to raise pitch and drop the pitch has anything to do actually with nervous system regulation? If
I think so.
What I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, people are different, so we can't make really blanket statements, but I think in general, yeah. I mean, the autonomic system, so your survival responses, your fight, flight, freeze responses we're talking about, these are autonomic, meaning they're automatic. They're part of the autonomic nervous system. You don't think about turning them on. They just turn on. That same system is what's governing your heart rate, your breath, your digestion, your endocrine function, immune function, right? All automatic processes, cell repair, barrier keeping in the gut, everything that's automatic. So when those survival responses are running the show to a large degree, they're taking away from the rest of the system's ability to do its job. So it may be very difficult to feel and sense what you need to do with your throat to, for example, raise the pitch or lower the pitch, or it may be difficult to access the sense of your diaphragm, or it may be difficult to modulate your breath in such a way that you can change pitch effectively or sing from a different place in your body, right? What we call interoception is the ability to feel the internal world. And interoception gets quite difficult a lot of the time when there's these powerful survival energies in the body and all these somatic memories of overwhelm and trauma, shock, depression, abandonment, whatever it was that happened, often many things. Those issues are in the tissues, as we say. So that can really interfere with your interoception and make it difficult to do things like changing pitch effectively.
Mm-hmm. So when you work with people, and you, again, kind of going back to that question, when somebody enters the room before, okay, first we're scanning, let's say we just look at the body, but the moment they open their mouth and you can hear their voice, are you, as a musician, because that's something for me, when I started learning with Irene and nervous system, this smart body, smart mind, sorry. When I did that, it was just like this combination of the information that comes from the voice, and the body.
Yes.
And so I started to notice that I pick up those frequencies, and it's like the information is coming to me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you can hear it. Yeah, as soon as
Yeah.
someone speaks, you can tell if there's more like sympathetic activation in them, or maybe it's more dorsal shutdown, they're more in freeze, lack of prosody. You know, there's sort of a very flat kind of voice is more indicative of like a depressed state. Whereas, yes, if there's a lot of anxiety, the words are very fast, and maybe it's higher pitched up here, and there's a little shake in the voice there, and you know, yes, there's so much that comes through the voice that is information. I mean, for me at this point, generally speaking, if someone walks in my office, it takes about a half a second to just know like what's going on in their system, because it's a whole body scan, a whole body sort of just impression that immediately lands. But the voice absolutely communicates that as well. Yeah.
And did your voice change
Yeah.
dramatically, big time, after you got really fully regulated as you are now?
Yeah, it definitely got lower, a bit more settled into my body. And along with that, part of my anxiety and adaptation to my childhood was learning to sort of be different people for different people, right? So depending on who's in the room, I'm going to be this way, essentially, so I can stay safe. It's a very common survival adaptation that a lot of people learn. So that also influenced my voice. I would often be like doing, sort of funny voices or characters, which is fine, and there's a place for that, but not if it's something you have to do, then it's kind of a problem. So I would say my voice has become much more authentic consistently, and it's just much more just me rather than me doing some kind of persona, or speaking out of, some way to try to make someone else feel comfortable, right? So I'd say that in terms of authenticity and also, pitch, it's changed.
Yeah, I think it's just something it happens spontaneously. It's not something you have to train.
Yeah.
Or think about, now I'm going to talk more authentically from my chest voice, or
Yeah. It's something it's a natural shift. Yeah.
It's a natural shift as you're
Yeah.
regulating your nervous system.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. And you recently also released your new album.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you want to share perhaps where people can listen to your material?
Sure. Yeah. If you just go to Spotify or whatever streaming service you use, is just look for my name, Seth Lyon, or the album name, which is Small Enough to Hold Everything. And I hope you like it. I also do healing music. Like I've got an album of sound healing music on my website. So if you go to sethlyon.com, you'll see a tab that says sound healing, and that takes you to my sound healing album, which is very different. The album that I just released is original songs that are done in a wide variety of genres. This is, it's everything from sort of folk to rock to, I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff in there. Because I'm a composer originally. So like when I approach writing songs, I don't try to stay in any genre. I do whatever I feel best suits that particular song. And whereas the healing music is quite different. It's doesn't have vocals and lyrics. It has vocals. It doesn't have lyrics. It's based around crystal singing bowls and instruments, and then there's different vocal toning in there that's actually associated with each chakra. It's based off the 7 chakra system, the sound healing album.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So closing slowly about this self-healing, it's definitely from a nervous system perspective possible for people to do it on their own.
Oh yeah. And I want to be clear, we also need support, right? Like it's important if you're going to do an online program that you find one that gives you some kind of support, because you need to be able to ask questions about your process. So to that degree, at least, I would recommend there be some engagement. As far as I know, our program is Smart Body, Smart Mind is the only one in the world that has a large team of highly trained somatic experiencing professionals, nervous system experts to answer questions. So I obviously recommend ours. Of course, I'm biased, but really, Irene was the first one ever to create this. And now you see a lot of stuff everywhere that's more sort of hacks and tricks and biohacks and tone your vagus nerve. And a lot of this stuff is being presented by people who have no training and have no idea what they're actually talking about. So I think that if you're gonna go the online route, I definitely recommend Irene's work, just because it's the best out there with the most support. So to that degree, yes, you can absolutely do it on your own. Just don't be afraid to ask questions, because it can be confusing and tricky when you enter into this work.
And if it is being difficult for people to do it when they are surrounded with people that don't support this healing.
Really hard, yeah.
Is it slowing down the whole process when you're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're constantly getting stressed by people around you, if you're constantly getting re-triggered into your trauma, it's it just, and you can still make progress, but it is much slower.
And what about in this whole process when we talk about nervous system healing, self-love and compassion?
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
is this?
Well, it's very important, but I would say that doing the nervous system work is the ultimate act of self-love and compassion. And there are various, self-love affirmations and mantras that are, that's fine, and they can be helpful too at a mental level, emotional level. Again, though, they're not going to really change the nervous system stuff, most likely. So self-love is, I say, what you do, right? What do you do with your practices, with yourself? And in my opinion, of course, as someone who is in this work, addressing these nervous system pieces, these really foundational core levels, is the ultimate act of self-love and self-compassion.
Totally. All right. I think this was really great. Not too long, not too short. We exchanged some information. I'm going to add your website, of course, in the description below.
Awesome.
And yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope we can do this one more time.
Absolutely. And I'll just add that our program, Smart Body, Smart Mind, that I mentioned, it is open for registration now. You usually only do that once a year, sometimes twice a year. So if this is intriguing to you, I just encourage you to go check that out.
Yeah, that was, you did it this last year twice, right?
We did it last year. Yeah.
Is this going to be only one time this year in
We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
It depends on the size of the people that come through, the capacity of our staff, the schedule, right? We will probably do it twice if we can, but we don't know for sure yet.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I did that, and I do it every year. Now this is the second round I did. And I'm looking forward to the third round. It's always wonderful to see you there in Q&A section.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Irene and all the wonderful resources. So I do highly recommend that, and I'll also post all this information in description. Thank you so much. Have a good day, because it's morning where you are, right?
Yes, I must go off to see clients.
Yes, thank you so much, and see you, my dear. Take care.
Okay, thanks, Patti. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.